Oh, welcome back. Now, young persons in the age category of 16 to 29-year-olds accounted for 402,401 of the 433,198 new voter registrations for this year's local government elections. Now, with less than a month before the country's elections are held on the 1st of November, it remains to be seen how the previous elections' youth voting patterns will influence this year's voter turnout. Now, more young people have shown disillusionment driven by issues including the high youth unemployment rate, a lack of service delivery, and of course political apathy. So to talk to us more about what is actually influencing youth participation in the local government elections, we're joined by Bongani Mahlangu from the South African Youth Council, and maybe later on joined by a few others. But for now, let's speak to Bongani Mahlangu. Bongani, good morning and thanks so much for your time.
Good morning to you, good morning to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me.
So, Bongani, let's start with, how have youth-led social movements as alternative methods of political engagement actually affected how the youth engage with mainstream politics in South Africa?
Thank you. So basically, it's always trying to contextualize these political objectives to youth and how it affects them or impacts them in their daily lives. Like, for instance, what we have been doing this year as far as unemployed graduates from universities and TVETs are concerned is basically to unpack and to say, when you vote for local government elections, these people go and form council, and it's the very same council that would then derive laws or bylaws, and it's the very same council that can come with mechanisms to ensure the absorption of unemployed graduates inwards in municipalities that can come and assist in ensuring that these municipalities function optimally. So then a young person who has a qualification, who has a skill, then sees where they fit in, over and above the message that you would find these political organizations always presenting, such as, if you vote for us, we will fix roads, we will cut grass, and so forth and so on, whereas it doesn't really speak to the specific needs and interests of an unemployed young person who's sitting in a ward, who's sitting in a municipality. So we try to unpack those things. We try to unpack what it means in these manifestos when we talk about youth pathways, to say which pathway is covered by the manifesto. For instance, you'd know that there are youth pathways such as unemployment is a pathway as well. There's employment, there's going to university, TVET, the skills training, and so forth. So when we say that if we push for youths to get absorbed in municipalities, or graduates to get absorbed in municipalities, that is a pathway as well. It speaks to employment. When we push as well to say in municipalities there are lack of skills, and the same roads that have potholes would require artisans, would require upskilling of people, that is then skills training. So then you take, as I said, these messages and you contextualize them. So it assists then in getting the youth up and going to vote, because then they see where they fit into this whole program. When we push and say, youth must also become ward councillors, youth must become proportional representatives, youth must go on and form part of the mayoral committees, become mayors, like what we have seen probably in the Northwest, where 10 municipalities are being contested by youth for mayorship, such as Mahikeng, such as Rustenburg, such as Dr. Ruth Mpati. So then youth resonate and they see that they are taken seriously, they are represented as an identity group, and equally, their interests are also presented there. And as we have also seen, when the manifestos now are being contextualized to municipal level, contextualized to what level, we are now also pushing that within that contextualization of these manifestos, there is a significant part that is dedicated towards youth. And not just talking about intensive or labor-intensive programs, but also capital-intensive programs, because as we said, understanding our youth, not everyone has a post-matric qualification. So those that do not have a post-matric qualification would probably be absorbed in your labor-intensive programs of municipalities or wards, and those that do have would probably be absorbed in your capital-intensive programs, such as being absorbed in your financial structures within municipalities. And I mentioned that because we know that most municipalities are failing. According to the MFMA report presented by the Auditor General, most municipalities cannot comply with their own IDPs, cannot comply with the MFMA, PFMA, and other strategic policies and objectives that they have set out for themselves, they cannot comply with them. And non-compliance has led to poor service delivery, as we have seen in places such as Ditsobotla, where Clover pulled out, as we see the potholes in Witbank, as we see Maluti Apufong, as we see CDB. So those are bad things for residents, but also there are opportunities to absorb youth and try to get them on board to resolve. So with these messages, as I said, how we package them, it becomes then easier for you to see where they fit in, other than these politicians, and you'll forgive me when I say old politicians, that just tell youth that vote and you'll get a job, whereas they cannot really unpack how a vote translates into a labor market absorption. So that is a space then that is created for us to come and then contextualize, to say, how does your vote translate to this? How does your vote translate to that? Over just giving a generic message that vote and get a job, whereas it cannot be unpacked what that means.
I'm still not understanding how swelling the ranks of these municipalities with youth is going to translate into a massive absorption of youth labor, Bongani.
Okay, so with that, because I gave various points, but with that point in particular, we said that we are not giving anyone a blank check. So more especially this youth, because this youth form part of our identity group. So we're basically saying that our support is conditional. And that's a mistake that is often made in South Africa, where you support people unconditionally. And when they get into these positions of power, they do their own thing. But also there is a risk, because a person can just get there and not do whatever, whereas they would have promised. So the support that we have given to these youth to swell these municipalities, PRs, ward councillors, and other strategic positions within these municipalities was simply that, to champion the interest of young people, to ensure that these pathways that I spoke about earlier manifest in the municipal objectives. That is why we've been pushing them to hold senior positions, such as within the executive of these municipalities, in order to ensure. That's why we've been pushing a lot of it to contest, because then they become part of the councillors there. And when it comes to voting, when it comes to also in subcommittees, if they chair subcommittees, they ensure that every objectives of that council translate into the interest of youth. So that is the condition that has been given. But as I said, that it's also, there is a risk element to it, because once people get into those positions, they might not. But also the same youths that have been, even though I can't mention names, but the same, some youths that we have been assisting, we have identified, are people who have a proven track record. So they do not just hold a certain birth certificate, a date of birth, but they do have the academic attributes or credentials. They do have the political credentials. They do have success reports or success that under their belts. So it's not just youths, even though we are pushing youths, but we are not pushing them solely on the basis or card of youth, but it's tried, tested individuals that we see, if they can get into these municipalities, they can actually achieve something for youths. And we have seen over the years that a lot of people have failed municipalities. Most, I think about 5% or less of municipalities in South Africa are able to get unqualified without finding audit reports, whereas most of them get between qualified or unqualified with findings up until not even submission. So these youths have been given a mandate, and hopefully then once they get in through the support that we are giving them, they will execute the mandate. Failure for them to do so, trust me, 2.5 years from now we'll be going to general elections, and there is no way that the same youths, or in fact it's going to make it even difficult for us as well to try and explain how a young person voting will even assist them. So this in essence becomes then our last hope in getting young people involved in decision-making processes, community work, and so forth. So if these youths that we are entrusting fail us, if these 100 municipalities where we want mayors do not succeed under the leadership of youth, then it would be a huge problem in 2.5 years' time from now, trying to convince young people to go to the polls.
Right, we've also now been joined by Nhlonipho Nxumalo, who is the Secretary General of the WITS University, SRC, and Letlhogonolo Letshele from My Vote Counts. Welcome to both of you as well. And let me just start with you, Letlhogonolo, the previous election voter trends of young people showed that there was a lot of disillusionment brought about by things such as inequality and, of course, also the failure to deliver services and proper infrastructure that weighed on the youth. Has anything changed, would you say, since then?
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the viewers at home. I think nothing has changed, to be honest, and the context is quite important for us to understand voter apathy. I mean, in the context of this year's elections, I mean, two factors, the local government crisis and COVID-19. I mean, we know the state of local government is very bad. I mean, only 27 municipalities out of 257 municipalities received a clean audit. There's quite a big irregular expenditure. The youth is not working. Close to 43% of the people are unemployed. So those things are really going to matter in terms of how people perceive, you know, the importance or the benefits of voting. So it's going to really affect their decisions. I mean, the youth is not oblivious to what is happening. They're not oblivious to the political system and the lack of representation in political parties and other elected representative structures. So those things really matter. And of course, the decline of the previous years also matters. So that's accumulation of the trends in terms of how people vote and how they turn out. And if you look at issues of, you know, education and unemployment, and you see how much they affect the youth as opposed to other demographics. If you think about issues such as policy in education, I mean, we, the youth, are the ones that are going to be disproportionately affected because we are the ones that are not going to be working. So when you tell the youth to come and vote, those are the things that they're going to actually think about, and they're going to matter in terms of going to the polls on the 1st of November.
And just on that point of youth unemployment, Letlhogonolo, we heard the finance minister speaking to that particular trend. So how does that influence how the youth approach elections and where their vote goes ultimately?
I think, you know, general research, you know, as we work on the ground, you ask simple questions, why are you not voting? I mean, all the time, the answer that you always get is, I'm not working. So they really, you know, determine voting because of job creation. And I mean, we know politicians, when they go on the ground, they promise people jobs and they never happen. So I think jobs are a serious commodity in terms of getting people to vote. So because people are not working, I think it's going to be a very challenging time for political parties to convince people because they are not working. Because jobs have always been a machinery to say, no, we're going to create jobs. But now with jobs, at unemployment at 43%, it's going to be very impossible to get the youth to come and vote come 1 November.
And Nhlonipho, if I could just come to you, young persons in the age category 16 to 29, they accounted for 402,401 of the 433,198 new voter registrations for this year's local government elections. Now, what does this indicate? Does it indicate that more young people are in fact keen to vote in the November polls?
Thank you so much for having me. I think, as Bongani had already alluded, that more young people are contesting these municipal elections. So I think for the past years, young people have been alienated from politics. So now that there are young people contesting these municipal elections, then it means like more young people are getting interested in voting to say, okay, now I see that there are young people who are contesting these spaces, maybe I can vote. So I think previously young people have been alienated, and then as a result, that is when we saw a decline in young people being interested in participating in these in elections in general. So now that there is more young people contesting, I think that is why we are seeing more young people registering to vote.
To the point of voter apathy, is it a case of voter apathy with young people, or is it more a case of political apathy? You know, in your experience at student politics, what do you glean?
I think it is a voter apathy towards who you relate to, because as we can see, during young people have started movements such as Fees Must Fall. Young people are able to champion their own causes without political organizations. So young people can define themselves outside organizations and achieve their own causes. So as a result, I think that the voting apathy is not necessarily with a political party, but rather who is there to represent them.
And on that front, Bongani, are we seeing the young people who will be contesting these upcoming local government elections, are they contesting on a political party ticket, or are they contesting in the main as independent candidates?
No, thanks. So a majority of them are contesting on the political party ticket, and then just a few are contesting then independently. But all of them are engaged in a political exercise. All of them are engaged in a democratic exercise, because basically politics becomes that who gets what, when, and how. So even if a person contests independently, that is a political exercise. That's not an apolitical action from them. But then to give a straight response, so most of them are on the political ticket. But then we, as I said, that we are non-partisan, so we assist youth. And also, as I said, these are not just young people, but they are capacitated young people. They are skilled young people. They understand the responsibilities of not just the young, but everyone else. They understand unemployment, how it affects youth in particular, with your 74.5% of youth being unemployed, but generally how it affects South Africa, because there's a lot of people unemployed in South Africa. They understand black females unemployment, because that's the leading unemployment for an identity group. They understand a lot of things. That's why some of them, when we engage them, would get things that such as scrapping of municipal or restructuring of municipal bursary systems, because most of those bursaries, you find that the beneficiaries qualify for NSFAS anyway, and taking that money and redirecting it towards initiatives such as entrepreneurship for young people. So that is things that happen with understanding. But as I said, most of them are on the political ticket.
So given that it is the political parties currently in the system that have led us to this position that we find ourselves in, with the massive rate of youth unemployment at almost 3/4, how then are they hoping to make any sort of meaningful inroads within those political parties? Because we've seen many people have come out, said we're going to try and fight this from within, and failed miserably. So I'd like to hear from you, Letlhogonolo. What's your view on that?
I'm really baffled as to how it will be possible to make changes. I mean, it will sound very apologetic from people saying we've been here for the past 27 years and we're still going to do this. It's really problematic at this point. But I mean, one of the issues about youth apathy has been representation. The youth has felt that, when you look at political parties, you do not find the youth. So it's very hard for political parties to make decisions for the youth when there's no representation. So I think maybe, having people our age in leadership position maybe might kind of, shift the policy debates a bit to, putting our issues on the table as the issues of education, issues of employment. So I think maybe it's a start, but it is very difficult, especially given what you just said now. And I agree with you that, I mean, these people have been here, the political party has been here. How much influence are you going to have, as a new young person joining a political party that has been established and, that has voted on party ideologies and it's established, and you're going to come in and say this is what you're going to do? It's very difficult, but I do believe it's a start. Having a youth representation, maybe they might shift policy debates to the youth perspective.
And I'm very interested in this because it's a very difficult space to maneuver. Parties already have their top structures in place. They already have their policy positions in place. So most political parties, as we speak right now, contesting this year's local government elections, they've already launched their manifestos. So how are they engaging and appealing to youth from these current manifestos that have been launched? Letlhogonolo, and I just spoke to you. Let me give this to Nhlonipho. Let's look at that. How have these current manifestos spoken to youth issues?
Firstly, most manifestos were speaking largely to, I haven't really viewed all of them as yet, but they were largely speaking to youth unemployment and economic inclusion. So by that, I mean that we heard that the EFF is planning to build RDP houses in Sandton, and so with regards to that, most political parties promise youth employment, And I don't think as youth that is something that because for the longest of time, youth unemployment has been an issue. And then these political parties, when they launch their manifestos, they come and tell us we are going to employ young people, this, and that. However, if there are no elections, these parties do not necessarily entertain the issue of youth unemployment. They do not necessarily engage as much as they do when it's elections. So it's more like a thing of they're just using it as a card to gain support of young people. So and young people are really not budging into the thing of saying we're going to create jobs, we're going to decrease youth unemployment, because it has been something that has been going on for the longest of time. There's a rate that has been increasing, and these politicians just come and say we're going to increase jobs, we're going to decrease youth unemployment, whereas after elections, that does not happen.
Well, we are running out of time, but I'm going to give each of you just an opportunity very briefly to wrap up, and give us your final sentiments. You can start, Bongani.
Okay, no, thanks. So in wrapping up, so what we have analyzed as well is that we have been looking at municipalities that are dominated by a certain political party. And I can tell you that on the list, IEC list, in the top three, like in the Northwest, for instance, top three of those municipalities, you find a dominance of young people. So that shows intent. And also you spoke on policy. The thing is, in South Africa, we do have progressive policies that have not been implemented based on the fact that you have people that are not fit for purpose. So the youth that I'm referring to are people that are fit for purpose and will implement what exists. And trust me, with the implementation of what exists in a pace and manner that incorporates the people that drafted these policies and in expectations of the people that must benefit from these policies, things might happen. And also, a lot of political parties did speak about youth, but in the context of labor-intensive programs. But the youth we've been speaking to are also speaking about capital-intensive programs that speaks also, as I said, to pathways. It shows the understanding of interests of youth that they're not the same. So with that being said and more, that is the confidence that we have generated from these young people, and we'll be assisting them. And as I said, if they mess up now 2.5 years, it's going to be a problem for them and everyone else. Thanks.
Letlhogonolo?
Thanks, Sakina. I think the voter turnout trends that we're seeing, or youth voter apathy, is merely a reflection of the things on the ground, the issues on the ground, the state of local government crisis in the context of these elections, unemployment crisis, COVID-19, corruption, and so forth. So it's really an indication of how people feel and how the youth feel about the leadership at the moment. And I would like to emphasize that the youth is not oblivious to the political system failures and the electoral system failures, in South Africa. So it's really not. It's not really about voter education and with lacking voter education. I think they are aware. It's just that it's very difficult for them to vote because of the issues that are on the ground. But I mean, this local government, maybe it might be different. There's more independent candidates coming in. They independent, and they also represent other community organizations and social movements. So maybe we might stand a chance having political parties and other parties as well, meaning independent candidates. So we can wait for November 1st.
Fair enough. And Nhlonipho?
Okay, thank you so much. As firstly, I have said that young people seem to be able to achieve their own causes without political help or influence. However, in South Africa, we live like in a democratic country where we require free, fair elections through a ballot. So I would like to encourage young people to make informed votes, informed voting. How do I mean? For example, if I at Braamfontein and there's a councillor that is saying I'm contesting to be a councillor, then that councillor must speak to your issues as young people. The councillor in Braamfontein, we know because Braamfontein is largely dominated by students. So that person must speak to issues of students. So what I'm saying is that young people must make informed voting. They must engage with the manifestos. They must engage and see which one do we relate to most, which one is most likely to resolve our issues. Because at the end of the day,
No, very interesting views, and I thank all of you for joining us this morning. It's going to be interesting to see what the trends are with regard to the youth vote. But thanks so much, Bongani Mahlangu from the South African Youth Council, and Nhlonipho Nxumalo from who's the Secretary General of the WITS University SRC, and Letlhogonolo Letshele, who is from My Vote Counts, talking to us about youth voting trends leading to this year's local government elections. And it's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a very interesting one.
It really is, but we've got to rush and say goodbye.
Yeah.
Another hour on SABC.